October 11th, the Duchess of Sussex shares a new glimpse of life with her daughter, Princess Lilibet, who she shares with husband Prince Harry.
Wife in Archie. I see a lot of my mum in Lily. She's very Spencer-like. She's got the same.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's daughter Lilibet is officially 4 years old. On Wednesday, June 4th, the Duchess...
Every baby born in America gets a number on their birth certificate that tells you exactly where they were born. It's simple math. California is 104. Always has been. But when Lilibet Diana's birth certificate hit the news, that number read 105. And 105, that's Colorado. Now, you might be thinking, this is just another royal family drama story. But listen, we're not talking about fancy dresses or family arguments anymore. We're talking about numbers. Numbers that don't lie and don't have opinions. And right now, those numbers are telling a story the world wasn't supposed to catch. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe, because what's coming involves vanishing doctors, impossible timelines, and details that connect in ways you won't believe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss this. Let's get into it.
Prince Harry and his daughter, Lilibet, enjoying a 4th of July parade in Montecito, California. For the first...
So here's where things get interesting. Someone actually picked up the phone and called the California Vital Records office. Not just a quick call either. They spent 25 minutes on the line and the whole thing was recorded. They were looking for one simple thing, any registration for Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. You'd think that'd be easy to find, right? I mean, we're talking about a royal baby here. The kind of birth that makes international headlines. The kind of event where news cameras are stationed outside hospitals for days just to catch a glimpse. When you call a Vital Records office, the process is usually pretty straightforward. You give them a name, a date, maybe a location, and they punch it into their system. Within minutes, they can tell you if there's a record or not. It's not complicated. These offices handle thousands of requests every single day. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, all of it sitting in databases that go back decades.
There's a christening on Friday at the couple's home in California. That in itself would...
If a baby was born in California and registered properly, that record should pop up without any issues. But here's what happened after those 25 minutes of searching. After going through the system, after checking and double-checking, California came back with nothing. They couldn't find any record of that birth. Not a partial match, not a maybe this is it. Nothing. Now think about that for a second. In a world where every single move the royal family makes gets tracked, photographed, and documented down to the smallest detail, California is basically saying, we don't have this in our system. And this isn't like trying to find some random person from 50 years ago where records might have gotten lost or damaged. This is a 2021 birth. Digital records, modern systems, everything backed up and searchable. Plus, we're not talking about just anybody here. This is supposedly one of the most famous families on the planet.
That those children, Meghan and Harry, are not entitled to privacy in this matter. And
when their kids are born, it's not a quiet affair. It's news that spreads across every continent within hours. Here's the thing that makes this even stranger. It's not that the records are sealed or marked as private. Those are real categories that exist. Sometimes records get restricted for various reasons, and when that happens, the office will tell you, yes, there's a record here, but we can't release it. That's not what happened here. What happened is they searched and found absolutely nothing to even indicate a birth took place. So this raises a pretty wild question. If California has no record of this birth in their official system, whose certificate was everyone looking at in the newspapers? Where did that document actually come from? Because birth certificates aren't something you just make up and share with the press. They're official government documents that get filed with the state where the baby was born.
The titles for their children.
Oh, let's be clear here. I mean, after the birth of
Archie, when it was announced, his name was Archie Harris.
There's a whole process. Hospitals submit the information, it gets verified, it goes into the state's database. It's not optional. And if the state says they don't have it, then something doesn't add up. You can't have a California birth without California having a record of it. That's not how the system works. So either the birth didn't happen where we were told it happened, or there's a whole other explanation that nobody's talking about. And when you start looking at that 105 code we mentioned earlier, the pieces start falling into a very different picture than the one the world was sold. Now let's talk about Dr. Melissa Drake. If you were pregnant in Santa Barbara and you wanted the best doctor in town, her name would come up every single time. She wasn't just good at what she did, she was legendary. Patients loved her. Other doctors respected her. She had this reputation as someone who genuinely cared about the families she worked with.
Not at any point during the months she worked there. She didn't see a baby bump. She didn't see morning sickness. She didn't see
not just another name on a hospital roster. When people talked about her, they'd use words like amazing and incredible. She was basically the doctor every expectant mother hoped they could get. So when the news came out that she was the one who delivered Lilibet, nobody was surprised. Of course it would be Dr. Drake. She was exactly the kind of high-profile, trusted physician you'd expect for something this important. Everything seemed to make sense. A famous doctor for a famous birth. Nothing unusual about that, right? But then something happened that caught everyone off guard. Just as people started asking more questions about the birth certificate and the timeline and all these little details that weren't quite adding up, Dr. Drake made an announcement. She was closing her practice.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have announced the birth of their second child. It's a little girl named Lilibet Lily Diana.
Not in 6 months, not even in a couple of months. She gave her patients 10 days notice. 10 days. That's it. Now, if you've ever been to a doctor's office, you know that's not how things work. Doctors don't just shut down their practice overnight. There are patients who've been seeing them for years. There are pregnant women with due dates coming up who need continuity of care. There's a whole process of transferring records, finding new doctors, making sure nobody gets left in the middle of their treatment. 10 days isn't enough time for any of that. In the medical world, this kind of sudden exit is basically unheard of. Her patients were scrambling. Women who'd been counting on her to deliver their babies suddenly had to find someone else, and fast. They weren't just losing a doctor. They were losing someone they trusted during one of the most important times in their lives.
back in 2021. Because for the first time, the questions aren't just about family arguments or fancy clothes.
And they couldn't understand why. Why would someone who seemed so dedicated to her work just walk away like that? Why the rush? Dr. Drake's explanation was that she needed to focus on her health. That's what she told everyone. And look, that's a completely valid reason. Doctors are human too. They get burned out. They deal with stress. Sometimes they need to step back and take care of themselves. Nobody would argue with that. But here's what made people raise their eyebrows. The timing. She didn't decide to close her practice when things were quiet. She decided to do it right when the questions about this particular birth were getting louder and louder. And there's another detail that makes this whole situation even more interesting. Her husband runs a high-end fertility clinic, not a regular medical practice, specifically a fertility clinic, the kind of place that deals with complex reproductive situations. Now, maybe that's just a coincidence. Maybe the timing was pure chance. Maybe her...
Thinkable. She leaked them herself. Yes, you heard that right. The woman who told the world she was protecting her kids from the
health issues just happened to line up with all these questions swirling around. But when you're trying to piece together what really happened, coincidences start to feel like breadcrumbs. One coincidence, sure. But when you start stacking them up, that's when you have to wonder if there's more to the story than what's being said out loud. Before we go any further with Lilibet's story, we need to rewind and talk about baby number 1. Because when you look at what happened with Archie's birth, it starts to feel like we've seen this movie before. The official story that came out was honestly wild. Like something straight out of a superhero film where everything just works out perfectly against all odds. Here's what we were told. Meghan went through labor and got not 1, but 2 epidurals. Now, if you don't know what an epidural is, it's basically a pain medication they inject into your spine during childbirth. It's super common and it works really well for managing pain.
8-3, and then I would scoot on over, and what was so nice is the security guards here would always say, break a leg, we hope you get it.
At 6:34 a.m.
But here's the thing about epidurals. They don't just numb the pain, they also make it pretty much impossible to walk. Your legs get heavy, you lose feeling. Doctors and nurses have to help you move around because you literally can't support your own weight properly. That's just how the medication works. But according to this story, after getting 2 of these epidurals, Meghan then gave birth in a bathtub. And then, and this is the part that made a lot of people's jaws drop, she was back home at Frogmore Cottage in just 2 hours. 2 hours. From birth to being home. Ask any mother who's been through childbirth and they'll tell you that timeline is basically impossible. After you give birth, especially with epidurals involved, you're not just hopping up and walking out the door.
In this really historical family.
When the formal decree arrived at King Charles's desk,
Your body needs time to recover. The medication needs time to wear off. The hospital needs time to make sure both you and the baby are stable and healthy. Most women stay in the hospital for at least 24 hours after giving birth, sometimes longer. It's not about wanting to stay. It's about making sure everything's okay before you leave. So the idea that someone could go through labor, get 2 epidurals, deliver a baby, and be home within 2 hours, that's not just unusual. That's medically remarkable. Some might even say it doesn't add up, but it gets more interesting. When Harry and Meghan did their first public appearance with baby Archie, they said he was 2 days old. 2 days. Fresh out of the hospital, brand new to the world. But then Harry said something in that interview that made people stop and rewatch the footage. He was talking about how babies change and grow, and he said, they change so much over 2 weeks.
The rainbow baby and the final baby of the Sussexes. Harry and Meghan have both expressed...
Wait, 2 weeks? If Archie was only 2 days old, why would Harry be talking about 2 weeks? Was it just a slip of the tongue? Was he thinking ahead to the future? Or was Archie actually older than they were letting on? Because if you're showing the world your baby for the first time and saying he's 2 days old, but then you accidentally mention 2 weeks, that's a pretty significant detail to mix up. Now you might think, okay, maybe it was just nerves. Maybe Harry misspoke. People make mistakes when they're in front of cameras, especially when they're new parents running on no sleep. That's totally fair. But when you start looking at the second baby and seeing similar strange details, the wrong state code, the missing records, the vanishing doctor, you start to wonder. One baby with a weird timeline could be a mistake or a misunderstanding. But 2 babies with timelines and details that don't quite match up, that's when it stops feeling like a mistake and starts feeling like a pattern.
about Archie and Lilibet's birth records have sparked panic inside Buckingham Palace.
And patterns tell stories. Now let's look at something on the actual birth certificate that raises even more questions. When you fill out a birth certificate, there are rules. Specific rules about what you can and can't put in certain boxes. It's not a creative writing exercise where you get to make up whatever sounds good. There's a format, and there are regulations that everyone has to follow. These rules exist for a reason, to keep official records consistent and accurate. On the birth certificate that was shown to the public for Lilibet, something looks really off when you check Harry's name. In the spot where his first name should go, it doesn't say Harry or even Henry, which is his actual given name. Instead, it lists the Duke of Sussex as his first name. And then in the spot for the last name, it says His Royal Highness. So according to this document, his name is basically Title McTitle.
this family and see anything other than loving parents and lovely children, you are the problem.
Now, at first glance, you might think that's just a royal thing. They have fancy titles, so maybe that's how they like to fill out paperwork. Makes sense, right? Except there's a problem. California, where this birth supposedly took place, has really strict rules about what you can put on a birth certificate. You're allowed to name your kid almost anything. Want to name your baby Apple or North or Blue Ivy? Go for it. California doesn't care about unusual names. But what California does care about is using government titles as actual names on official documents. You can't walk into a California records office and list yourself as the governor or the judge or the senator. That's not how it works. Those are positions and titles, not names. The state has specific regulations that prevent people from using official government titles in the name fields of these documents.
Hint at issues, she claims to have witnessed them with her own eyes. And most shocking of all, she exposes the reason why the world has rarely...
It's not a suggestion. It's an actual rule. So if Harry's certificate shows the Duke of Sussex and His Royal Highness in the name fields, there's a pretty big issue. Either that document isn't actually a real California birth certificate, meaning it's more like a ceremonial paper, something made to look official but not actually filed with the state. Or someone filled it out in a way that doesn't match California's format, and it somehow made it through anyway. Neither option really makes sense when you think about it. Like, if it's a ceremonial document, why was that the one shown to the public? Why not show the actual filed document that follows California's format? And if it's supposed to be the real document, how did it end up with titles where names should be? Birth certificates get reviewed before they're finalized. Someone at some point would typically catch something like that.
Styles, and inheritance rights of the Sussex children, Archie and Lilibet,
And flag it for correction. But apparently, that didn't happen. Or if it did, nobody bothered to update what the public saw. This matters because it goes back to that same question we keep running into. What exactly were people looking at when they saw this birth certificate? Was it a real government record that follows all the proper format? Or was it something else entirely, maybe a fancy version made for show, while a completely different document sits in California's actual files? Because if California is saying they don't have any record of this birth, and the document everyone saw doesn't match California's own format about how names can be listed, then we're not just talking about a small mistake or a typo. We're talking about a document that doesn't line up with how the system is supposed to work at all. All right, so let's circle back to that number we started with.
Royals wrote to Santa Claus. The sweet note wasn't visible in full, but parts of it were shown on a white mug and
The 105 code. Remember, California should be 104, but Lilibet's certificate shows 105, and 105 belongs to Colorado. Now, at first, you might think, okay, maybe someone just typed the wrong number. These things happen, right? But when you start looking at what makes Colorado special, that explanation starts to fall apart pretty quickly. Colorado isn't just any random state. When it comes to certain types of family planning, Colorado has some of the most private laws in the entire country. Specifically, we're talking about surrogacy. If a baby is born in Colorado through a surrogacy arrangement, the state has incredibly strict privacy protections in place. Those records don't just get filed away like a normal birth, they get sealed, locked down. The kind of privacy that makes it nearly impossible for anyone outside the immediate situation to access the information. Now think about what we've been piecing together this whole time.
In years. Because here's the thing. In a world where everything can be spun, clarified,
We've got a birth certificate with a Colorado code instead of a California code. We've got California saying they can't find any record of this birth in their system after a 25-minute search. We've got a doctor who suddenly closed her practice right when questions were getting loud, and that doctor's husband just happens to run a high-end fertility clinic. When you lay all those pieces out on the table, they start pointing in a very specific direction. If Lilibet was actually born in Colorado rather than California, it would explain absolutely everything. The 105 code isn't a typo. It's literally telling you where the birth was registered. The missing California records make perfect sense because California wouldn't have any records to find.
A very happy Thanksgiving to all of the American squaddies and any American squaddies overseas who are celebrating.
There's nothing wrong with their system. They're just looking in the wrong state's database. And the connection to a fertility clinic, that stops being a random coincidence and starts being a pretty significant detail. Colorado's privacy laws around surrogacy are designed to protect everyone involved. The families, the surrogates, the medical professionals, everyone gets a layer of protection that you don't find in a lot of other states. So if you wanted to keep the details of a birth extremely private, and you needed that privacy to be backed up by actual state regulations, Colorado would be one of your best options. The records would be sealed automatically. No public access. No phone calls that turn up results after 25 minutes of searching. Here's what makes this even more interesting. The story that the public was told said Santa Barbara, California.
First good look at Meghan and Harry's daughter Lilibet about who she looks like. I will show you the top contenders and be sure.
Sunny, California. The Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. That's what made it into the news. But the actual paperwork, the thing with the official government numbers on it, is saying something completely different. Numbers don't lie. They can't be talked into changing their story. A 105 is a 105, and that means Colorado. So you've got two different stories happening at the same time. There's the version the public heard, with California and a specific hospital and a famous doctor. And then there's the version the numbers are telling, with a Colorado code and sealed records, and a trail that leads straight to the Rocky Mountains instead of the Pacific coast. Those two stories can't both be true. One of them has to be wrong. And when it comes down to trusting someone's words versus trusting the actual numbers on government documents,
impossible for one to shake that ass with such vim and vigor when you're about to give birth. That the moves that
the numbers tend to win out every single time. They don't care about protecting anyone's privacy or maintaining a certain image. They just tell you what they tell you. And now here's a detail that might seem small at first, but when you start digging into it, it opens up a whole new set of questions. We need to talk about names, specifically Meghan's full legal name and why it matters. Most people know her as Meghan Markle. That's the name that was everywhere in the media when she started dating Harry. That's the name on all the magazine covers and in all the headlines. Simple enough. But when the palace was preparing for the royal wedding back in 2018, they had to do something very official. The Church of England needed to verify Meghan's identity for the marriage ceremony. This isn't just a formality where someone checks a box and moves on. When you're getting married in the Church of England, especially when you're marrying into the royal family.
6 next month, helping mom pick roses.
I think this feels like a really exciting time for Meghan. They're living a very...
They need to confirm exactly who you are. Legal documents, official paperwork, everything has to match up perfectly. So when researchers started looking through these official palace records, they found something that didn't quite add up with what everyone assumed. The documents didn't just list her as Meghan Markle. They had her down as Rachel Meghan Engelson, née Markle. That's a mouthful, right? But here's the important part. Engelson. That name probably doesn't ring a bell for most people, and there's a reason for that. Engelson was the last name of Meghan's first husband. The marriage that ended years before she ever met Harry. Now, when people get divorced, the name situation can go different ways. Some people change their name back immediately. Some keep their married name for professional reasons, especially if they built a career under that name.
Been campaigners on the dangers of social media, particularly when it comes to children and young people. So what's been really interesting...
Some just never get around to changing it officially, even though they go by something else. It happens. But what's interesting here is that when Meghan was about to become a duchess, about to take on this massive new royal identity, her ex-husband's last name was still part of her official paperwork. The Church of England doesn't just make up names or guess at what they should write down. If they listed Rachel Meghan Ingelson née Markle, that's because that's what showed up in her legal documents at the time. That was her official name on record. So even though the whole world knew her as Meghan Markle, even though she'd been using that name professionally for years, legally she was still tied to a name from her past that most people had completely forgotten about. You might be wondering why this matters. On the surface, it seems like just a paperwork issue. People have complicated legal names all the time.
Grown up Princess Lilibet running through their beautiful, what I presume to be yard in Montecito for International Day of the Girl.
But when you're trying to verify someone's identity for something as official as royal marriage documents, and then later for birth certificates, names matter. They matter a lot. If there's any confusion about what someone's legal name actually is versus what they go by publicly, that creates complications. It creates questions about which name should appear on which documents. And here's where it connects back to everything else we've been talking about. We've already seen documents that don't seem to follow the normal rules. Birth certificates with state codes that don't match the story. Names listed in ways that break California's regulations. Missing records where records should definitely exist. When you add in the fact that even Meghan's own legal name seems to have been more complicated than anyone realized, it's just one more layer.
On Meghan's Instagram. This also comes on the back of the fact that they just announced that
to this whole tangled situation. One more detail that makes you wonder if the paperwork behind the scenes was ever as straightforward as the public story made it seem. So let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. Because when you line everything up side by side, something becomes pretty clear. This isn't just about one baby or one birth certificate. This is about two babies, two birth stories, and two sets of details that don't quite line up the way they're supposed to. With Archie, the first baby, we've got this timeline that sounds like it came straight out of a movie. 2 epidurals that should have made walking impossible, followed by a bathtub birth, followed by being home in 2 hours. Then there's Harry saying 2 weeks when the baby was supposedly only 2 days old during that first public appearance. And when people tried to verify where Archie was actually born, they hit walls.
Meghan revealed a secret about Lilibet through a single photo, and 3 things suggest she might be a horrible mother. Recently, Meghan took her family to...
Questions got dodged, records got fuzzy. Nobody seemed to have straight answers. Then comes Lilibet, the second baby, and it's like watching the same movie but with different details. This time it's a birth certificate with a 105 code instead of 104. It's California saying they have no record of the birth after someone spent 25 minutes on the phone trying to find it. It's a doctor who suddenly closed her practice with 10 days' notice, right when questions were getting loud. It's a document with titles listed as names in a way that doesn't match California's own format about how birth certificates are supposed to work. When something weird happens once, you can chalk it up to a mistake. Maybe someone filled out a form wrong. Maybe there was a communication error. Maybe it's just one of those things where the planets aligned in a strange way and everything got confused. That happens sometimes. People make mistakes, systems glitch, paperwork gets messed up.
Yeah, Meghan is wearing her heart on her sleeve and her collar. Look closely and you'll see the kids' names.
One isolated incident doesn't necessarily mean there's a bigger story, but when the same kinds of issues show up twice, When both babies have stories that don't quite add up, that's not a coincidence anymore. That's a pattern. And patterns mean something. They tell you that whatever's happening isn't random. It's consistent. There's a reason these same types of questions keep coming up with both children. Here's what makes this even more interesting. The mainstream media has been covering Harry and Meghan nonstop for years. Every outfit Meghan wears gets analyzed. Every time they appear in public, it makes headlines. People write entire articles about whether they held hands or didn't hold hands at some event. The level of attention is absolutely massive.
My show is coming out, which I'm so excited for, and also my business, which I think there's been a lot of curiosity.
You'd think with all that coverage, with all those journalists following every single move, someone would have dug into these document issues. Someone would have asked the hard questions about the birth certificates and the timelines and the missing records. But that hasn't happened. Instead, we get endless articles about family drama and fashion choices and who said what to whom. The focus stays on the surface level stuff, the emotional story, the relationship conflicts, the lifestyle content. And look, that stuff is interesting too. People care about it. But when you've got actual documents with state codes that don't match, when you've got records that can't be found, when you've got timelines that medical professionals would tell you don't make sense, those are the kinds of details that deserve attention. The media's silence on these specific issues is loud.
Meghan is making her daughter mimic Princess Charlotte, and no one realizes this is a terrifying plot. In the Christmas card, Prince Harry...
It's like there's this unspoken agreement to not look too closely at the paperwork, to not ask the uncomfortable questions, to keep the conversation focused on safer territory. Maybe it's easier that way. Maybe digging into birth certificate details isn't as exciting as talking about royal family feuds. But Tom Bauer doesn't seem to be playing by those rules. And when someone finally connects all these dots publicly, when all these patterns get laid out for everyone to see, the conversation is going to shift, whether people are ready for it or not. At the end of the day, a birth certificate is supposed to be one of the simplest documents in the world. You're born somewhere. Someone writes down where that happened. The state files the paperwork. Done. It's not complicated. It's not supposed to raise questions. It's just a record of a fact. This person entered the world on this date in this place.
Daughter to enjoy the same level of spotlight. On Lilibet's first birthday, Harry and Meghan flew to Britain with both kids during the Jubilee festivities and
But that's not what we're seeing here. Instead, we've got numbers that point to a completely different state than the one mentioned in the official story. We've got California searching their system for 25 minutes and coming up empty. We've got timelines that don't make medical sense when you actually think them through. We've got a doctor who closed her practice right when questions started piling up. We've got documents with names listed in ways that break the basic rules of how birth certificates are supposed to be filled out. The 105 code isn't just sitting there by accident. Numbers on government documents don't randomly change themselves. If it says 105, somebody entered 105, and 105 means Colorado. That's not up for debate. That's just what that number means. And when California says they can't find any record of a birth, that's not because their system is broken or their staff didn't look hard enough.
Maybe Meghan fooled the world. Every time Meghan shares new photos of her children, it raises questions. Because we see that Archie and Lily...
It's because the record they're searching for isn't in their database. When Harry said 2 weeks instead of 2 days during that first interview with Archie, that wasn't just nervous new parent rambling. You don't accidentally add 12 days to your baby's age. That's a pretty specific number to say when you mean something completely different. And when a well-respected doctor suddenly shuts down her practice with barely any notice, right at the exact moment when her connection to this birth is getting attention, that's not just unfortunate timing. All of these details have been sitting right there in plain sight. The documents were public, the interviews were recorded, The numbers were printed on official paperwork. Nobody had to dig through secret files or hack into hidden databases. Everything we've talked about came from things that were already out there, available for anyone to see.
Harry's 2 babies growing up fast in this cozy snapshot of fall.
I think this feels like a really exciting time for Meghan.
But seeing them and actually looking at what they're saying are two different things. Tom Bower has built his reputation on connecting dots that other people miss. He doesn't just repeat the surface story, he goes deeper. He finds the details that got overlooked or ignored. And based on everything he's been researching, what's about to come out is going to make people look at all of this with completely fresh eyes. The numbers have already told their story. The missing records have already said what they needed to say. The timelines have already shown their inconsistencies. Now, it's just a matter of whether people are ready to actually listen to what's been right in front of them this whole time. Because once you see the pattern, once you understand what these details are pointing to.
Did you notice that Archie and Lilibet don't have Meghan's hair color at all? Maybe Meghan fooled the world. Every time Meghan shares new photos,
You can't unsee it. The questions don't go away. They just get louder. So, what do you think about all of this? Are these just coincidences stacking up, or is there something bigger going on? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every single one. If you want to catch Tom Bower's full findings when they drop, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this story's far from over. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.